What's going on YouTube? It's Tej back again with another video, and today I'm giving you my ranking of all current 8 NFL head coaching openings. Hopefully you all enjoyed today's video. If you do, hit that like button, it would help me out a ton. And if you're new to the channel and want to help us get to 500 subscribers, we've been growing really quickly and I really appreciate all the support lately. Help us get to 500 by hitting that big red subscribe button. And most importantly, give me your ranking of these open head coaching jobs down in the comments section. This is a very subjective thing. Everybody has their different priorities, so I'd love to see your list as I give you mine. I'm going to take myself off the screen for one moment. Here are the openings I'm sure you know all about. The 8 teams currently that have head coaching openings, and there's might be a couple more. We still don't know about Pete Carroll in Seattle. And of course, things are obviously subject to change based off of maybe a big-time head coach getting one of these jobs if they so desire. So let's go ahead and jump into my number 18. And now I will reside in the top right corner. At number 8, I have the Houston Texans. This is a tough one, right? Because you look at the cap space, not terrible. And, you know, a lot of the money spent on the roster this past year was a lot of 1-2 year deals, veterans, obviously expiring contracts for the most part. And they do have a fair amount of draft picks. You know, Nick Caserio is an unproven general manager to this point. And with Deshaun Watson still standing firm, even if this team hires Brian Flores, that he wants out of Texas or the Houston organization in general, he has a problem with the management and the ownership of the Texans. I just look at this job as one that's really not all that desirable, especially considering you'd be inheriting a team that needs a quarterback long term ahead of one of the most murky, uncertain quarterback classes we've had in recent memory, at least over the last 4 to 5 years or so. So because of that, I'm not really enamored by this job, but I could see where some people have this a little bit higher because there is a decent cap spot. There's not a whole lot of huge contracts that loom over this team down the line, and for the most part, they have their own picks, and they definitely have some pieces they could also move. Like Brandon Cooks is still on the roster. That could be someone that they trade and get some more assets for. On to number 7. I have the New York Giants next. Negative cap, and you know, part of the reason they are really low is because not a whole lot of cap space. And Daniel Jones, I've actually been a little higher on him, and you know, I think he started to get some positive buzz at the beginning of the year. People were seeing he's not all that bad. He has a bad offensive line in front of him, but he's still making things happen. That diminished as the year went on, and obviously he got hurt. And you know, by the end of the year, you see Mike Glennon and Jake Fromm trying to keep this offense afloat. If anything, it made me feel better about Daniel Jones. You know, I still don't think he's a superstar, but I think he could be a competent starter, and he's more than likely the best bet for this team to roll out as a starting quarterback going into this season. So if you're a head coach, you might look at that and say, hey, this guy's going to his 4th year. I think I can save him, right? There's still head coaches across the NFL that are very prideful, right? Like there are people like, say, Matt Rule, who think, I can fix Sam Darnold, and that doesn't obviously happen. So I think there's going to be a head coach that sees this as like, hey, look, Saquon Barkley was the number 2 overall pick, regardless of whether you think he should have been or not. Kenny Golladay makes $18 million a year. He has talent, whether you think he should make that much money or not. That's what he is making. And then the defense has some pieces, and you know, if you can keep Patrick Graham, I think that would be an awesome move, kind of like how the Cowboys kept Kellen Moore as their OC despite, moving on from Jason Garrett. That would be a positive start, and I think there's going to be somebody who likes this job, but I look at it as the offensive line needs a ton of help. There is no guarantee that Jones is anything other than mediocre, because that's pretty much what he's been. Saquon Barkley, big injury there, and how productive can, an uber-talented running back, no doubt, but what does he look like behind that offensive line? Again, it goes back, you got to fix that up a ton. I think there's some talent on the outside. I'm a big Kenny Golladay fan. Loved what I saw in spurts from Kadarius Toney, and whether it's Shepard or Slayton as your 3 long term, I think there's some pieces there, and I think the defense is really good. And if you can keep Patrick Graham as your DC, I think that is a really nice piece on your side. And another part that makes this job a little bit more appealing, and maybe 7 is too low. Love to have your thoughts. Do have 10 picks this upcoming draft, 2 in the top 7. So if you are looking at this and saying, well, I have 2 picks, and I don't care about reaching for Tyler Linderbaum at 7. You could go Ikem Ekwonu, get you a tackle to pair with Andrew Thomas. You fix the outside, and you get Linderbaum to really repair that interior, and this team could be right back on track. And then you go edge at the top of round 2 or whatever the case may be. But I just see a whole lot of work here, and plus just the expectations around New York. I am a Yankees fan for baseball. I'm a Knicks fan for basketball. I understand this is not a market made for everybody, and because of that, you see a lot of head coaches, as soon as they leave, maybe find some extra success, maybe in a lower level position other than head coach. But this is a tough market to play in, and I kind of accounted for that at least a little bit in this ranking. I went backwards there, on to number 6, the Minnesota Vikings. only reason I have them just edging out, right? You'll look at this and say, well, they're even more in negative cap territory, and they have 3 less picks, including not 2 in the top 7. Hear all that. Kirk Cousins, cap hit of $45 million. I think you can still fetch a decent asset. I'm not entirely sure you can get a first rounder given that cap hit, unless a team, let's say, a Pittsburgh Steelers, a New Orleans Saints, a Washington football team. I don't think he'll go back there, but for example's sake, and then they probably extend him and try to move that cap hit out over the length of a year or 2 more on top of what he has for this season. So I think you can move Kirk Cousins and get some of these assets back that you don't have if you're, working with the Giants or whatever the case may be. But you do have Kirk Cousins, who played really well this year. You have Justin Jefferson, who in my mind, top 3 wide receiver in the NFL right now. Adam Thielen still plays pretty good football, and he's still, a very above average starting outside wide receiver. And you have Dalvin Cook, one of the better running backs in football. And that offensive line has gotten better. It took years for Rich Spielman to get there, the previous GM for the Vikings, but it started to make some progress, and the defense is getting older. But if you can manage to keep Danielle Hunter, and this is where, if you're a head coach, this is probably my number one focus here, find a way to make Danielle Hunter happy, have him stick around, because once he got hurt, this team's pass rush evaporated. It was gone. So there's some things that I'm enamored by with this Vikings team. I obviously, preseason-wise, had them making the playoffs. They fell short of that expectation, but not by far. And plus, you look at the NFC North moving forward, and that's why I have another team pretty high on this list. I'm starting to think Aaron Rodgers might go back to Green Bay, but that's obviously not certain. The Lions are still a year or 2 away. Minnesota, if they keep Kirk Cousins and decide to go all in for another year or 2, potentially making a Super Bowl push, they could, if Rodgers is out of the division, be the best team in the NFC North. So that's obviously interesting, and that's why, again, I just edge them out over the Giants, who would have to compete against the Cowboys. Washington, if they get a quarterback, they're deadly. The Eagles made the playoffs. A little bit harder if you're guaranteed 6 games every year. And then I did it again, number 5, the Miami Dolphins. This is a really tough one. Part of why they aren't higher, right? Because you'll look at this and say 9 picks this year. They don't have their first round pick. They have the 49ers. So I know Miami fans last week were rooting for the Cowboys, and this week they're rooting for the Packers. I think they'll get lucky, or get their wish this week, I should say. And they have the most cap room in the NFL. And you could say, well, hey, money fixes offensive line. And I wouldn't disagree, right? You go sign some tackles, some interior offensive linemen. You could patch that up pretty quickly. Plus, a lot of talent on the defensive side of football. You already have Byron Jones, Xavier Howard. It's a really nice corner duo. Javon Holland was a fantastic pick. If you weren't around my channel for the draft content, I really was knocking and making a case for Trevon Moehrig to be safety 1, or Javon Holland to be safety 1 right there with Trevon Moehrig. Sorry, I got those two mixed up there. But to me, it was a lot closer than I think the hype leading up to the draft had made it seem, and Holland proved to be one of the best value picks in this draft. Plus, you have Jalen Phillips, your first-round pick, Christian Wilkins from a few years ago. There's a lot of talent, and a lot of young talent in specific, on that defensive side of the football, but you got to fix the offense, right? And it starts with the offensive line, and maybe if you fix the offensive line, you can change up your offensive scheme a little bit, and it's not so RPO heavy, and you can actually have Tua take advantage of the downfield speed that Jalen Waddle presents, and maybe if you add another speed demon like you tried to with Will Fuller, you can push the ball down the field a little bit more, as opposed to, handoff or slant, essentially, and that's kind of what the offense evolved into down the stretch, and they were winning football games, so give them credit. But what holds me back a little bit on this, as I go off on a long tangent, you got the Pats in that division, who I think, with a quarterback on a rookie deal, they're going to be competitive for the next few years. Josh Allen, the Bills, that playing in the AFC divisional round, knock on the door for the conference championship, and if they win this week against the Chiefs, they're my pick to go to the Super Bowl for the AFC. So that obviously makes things tough. Plus, you assume the Jets are going to start to make some incremental progress under now second-year head coach Robert Saleh. And the relationship with Chris Greer and Brian Flores obviously wasn't great. So stepping into that awkward spot can be really tough. It's almost like when you were little and you saw your parents fighting and you were about to walk into the room. You didn't really know what to do. That almost is comparable here. But hey, if you're looking at this and saying, I got 9 picks, I have a first rounder, may not be ours, but it's still a first rounder. And, I have almost $16 million in cap room. We can fix and retool this offense. Maybe if you're Brian Daboll, I can fix Tua. I can see why this spot is really appetizing to potential head coaching candidates. And then we're on to the Raiders. I've been throwing some names out there. Daboll for the Dolphins. It's a little early for me to speculate on who's going to get these jobs and whatnot. Plus, we don't know what other jobs might open up. But there's one I'm willing to put some money on. It's Jim Harbaugh to the Las Vegas Raiders here. I think it makes a ton of sense. Don't count out the Bears, who we'll talk about here in a moment. But okay cap situation, and there's still some pieces, and obviously with these cap numbers, this is as of right now per Spot Track. A lot of players are going to have deals restructured, and there's going to be more space opened up. So, don't get stuck to where these teams are at financially and where they might rank in the NFL. It's going to change a whole lot over the next couple of months. But, okay cap spot, and, decent amount of draft capital, 8 picks, you have your first rounder. And considering what team you would be inheriting, just made the playoffs despite the Gruden controversy, the Ruggs situation, Damon Arnett, Nate Hobbs, even as you're in the playoffs, right? If you can just go in there and bring some stability, I feel like this team naturally takes at least a half step forward, right? So that on top of you're going to have a new GM, which I think is really attractive if you're a head coach, being paired with a GM, and you two can have a singular goal in mind and a vision for where this team can go moving forward. I think that is also appealing for this job. So this is one of the better gigs. Also, you compare this to Minnesota, 2 teams that could move on from their quarterback this year. The Raiders are in a win-win spot. Either you're getting maybe the best value at quarterback with Derek Carr making $20 million. Obviously, you compare him to Mahomes, he's not as good, but he's making half the money, so it allows you to do a lot more with the roster. Comparable value there. Or you move on from Derek Carr, and because he only makes $20 million, you're getting a first rounder from Washington. And granted, they pick 11, so you might want to give up something in return to even that balanced trade out. Or at least Washington might demand that. Pittsburgh as a team picking at 20. The New Orleans Saints at 18 might give up their number 1 pick to get their hands on Derek Carr and potentially extend him. So there are options in play here. Maybe it's a Russell Wilson, the swap with Derek Carr. There's a lot in play here. So if you're looking at this Raiders job, I think this is a really attractive one at that. On to the top 3. Again, same thing I talked about with the Minnesota Vikings earlier. The NFC North, if Rodgers leaves, is up for grabs. And if Kirk Cousins leaves the Division 2, then I think the NFC North pretty quickly shifts into one of the weaker divisions, if not the weakest division in the NFL. But for a team like the Bears, who I had Justin Fields, my number 3 overall player on my big board last year, weighing positional value, of course, I think there's something to work with there. And if you're Jim Harbaugh looking at this job, if you're Brian Flores and you have an idea of an offensive coordinator, if you're Brian Daboll, whoever the case may be, you're looking at this job, the biggest attracting factor is Justin Fields. Now, I know they're going to probably not bring back Allen Robinson, and same thing I talked about with the Raiders. You're getting a new GM with you. Again, you can have a singular vision in mind. You're going to want to repair that wide receiver room and add some players alongside Darnell Mooney, who I think is a really special guy, and he's improved as a route runner, and he can win other than just straight line speed and making big plays down the field. But hey, that brings a whole lot of value in and of itself. Good running back room, and the offensive line actually got a little bit better as the year went on. Larry Bourne was better than I had anticipated, and Jason Peters at 38, 39 years old outplayed my expectations. Tevin Jenkins looked pretty good as well once we got to see him on the field. So a lot to work with there with already talent. Now, the defense is getting older, and that's part of why this is not the number 1 job or anything like that, right? Akeem Hicks is a player you're going to have to move on from in a couple of years. Khalil Mack maybe is a trade piece. But that said, you do have Jalen Johnson, and I think he can be a number 1 corner, or at least a really nice 1B. Maybe add one more potential starting outside corner to pair opposite of him, and I think you're in a really, really nice spot. Eddie Jackson, another one of those aging players, but I think you still got some run left in him. Roquan Smith, like 27 right now, 28 maybe. So another good young player to work with there. Robert Quinn's one of those aging players you probably want to move on from, though. So mixed bag there on the defensive side, but 10th most cap space, and one of the weaker parts about this job, though, is the draft capital. Only 5 picks this year, no first rounder. But I feel like it's a fair trade-off if you have the idea in mind that, okay, I don't have a first rounder this year, but where would Justin Fields be in the QB class this year? I think he'd be a clear-cut QB1. Now, obviously, people are going to look at this and be like, oh, he sucked this year or whatever. But if you're evaluating him as a prospect and you don't want to rush to judgment after just 1 year of play, not even 16 games under his belt, he would be QB1 if he came out with this draft class. So kind of give and take. So I feel pretty good about this Bears job. And also, I think there is something to be said about the Raiders and the Bears. You played for these storied franchises that have so much history behind them. Now, the next team that's up on my list does not have that same type of tradition. But I think there is something to be said as I'm going to fix the Chicago Bears, and I'm going to fix the Vegas Raiders after everything they went through last year. So I think there is something to that makes it more appealing for a potential head coach, especially if you are Harbaugh, right? Harbaugh's chasing prestige. He's almost like an actor going after Oscars now, right? Going after that prestige label. These are types of jobs and reclamation projects that earn you a whole lot of prestige and make you a potential Hall of Famer down the line. tangent aside, let's talk about the Jacksonville Jaguars. They do not have a whole lot of prestige, and this might be the number one job if Trent Baalke gets fired, and as the time of me recording this, he has not. If he is out, and you have a GM working with you, again, unilateral vision, this job gets that much better, but a ton of cap space, even after they spent a fair amount of money last year, and then 12 picks this year's draft, and of course that includes the number one overall pick, your choice at one of the top 2 edge rushers, or Evan Neal, who's getting a whole lot of steam as a potential number one overall pick, and I don't hate that whatsoever. So there is a whole lot of clay to work with here to mold your team if you're a potential head coach. And I haven't even talked about Trevor Lawrence. I'm talking about cap, draft picks, and hopefully they move on from Trent Baalke because it has not worked. But Trevor Lawrence is the most valuable quarterback to potentially inherit here. I know Carr is better right now. I know Kirk Cousins is better right now. But Trevor Lawrence was the number one pick since he came out of high school. So that has a ton of gravitas to him. Now, hopefully, Urban Meyer didn't ruin him. I don't think that is in play here after just 1 year. I think if they get a right offensive mind, whether it's the head coach or the OC, depending on what direction they go here, there is a whole lot to tap into. And now I know the wide receiver room definitely needs to add some extra talent, but if they can find a coach who can utilize Laviska Shenault, I still think he's a wide receiver one in the making. And, I was super high on Laviska Shenault when he came out 2 years ago, so maybe I'm just holding on to my priors a little too long. But get Chark back if you bring him back, and he comes back healthy from injury. I think there's some pieces to work with there. And, Travis Etienne allows you to not miss too much with James Robinson probably going to miss a good chunk of next year. And even on the defensive side, right? You have Josh Allen. Got some decent play out of your second-round pick. Tyson Campbell out of Georgia. Took me a minute to think of that. And then you just signed Shaq Griffin. So there's still some pieces to work with there on the defensive side of the football. So I'm enamored by this job a whole lot. But again, a whole lot of clay to play with Lawrence, cap space, and draft capital, including the number one pick. So I think, obviously, it's a very attractive job. And the number one, though, I have the Denver Broncos, right? Great cap situation. They've already extended the likes of Courtland Sutton. They have a ton of draft picks as well, including 2 2s and 2 3s after the Von Miller trade. Now I think they need to add some edge rush because that started to fall apart after they moved on from Miller and Bradley Chubb was hurt. But that was also missing Bradley Chubb, who you assume comes back and can be your number one edge rusher. And then I don't really hate the idea of Malik Reed being your guy opposite of him. Find an inside linebacker, maybe bring back some of the guys that you've previously had on the roster and hope that they stay healthy. The secondary is fantastic. You have Justin Simmons, who's one of the best safeties in football. You add just a league average guy next to him. Simmons is good enough to make him look that much better. And really just looking for a box safety, which this time in the NFL, a dime a dozen pretty much. The offensive line's in a better spot, need a right tackle, but other than that, in a pretty good situation. They're going to move on from Melvin Gordon and release Javonte Williams, who the more you saw of him, the entire NFL fan base started to like him that much more. And again, you have the wide receivers to go along with the running back and the offensive line that I talked about. Then it's going to draw the attention of quarterbacks that are on the move. Whether it's Rodgers getting a pick where he wants to go, Wilson demanding a trade, Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be available. Now, I know he's not great, but compared to Teddy Bridgewater, might be a step up. Kirk Cousins. I don't think there's going to be an in-division trade with Derek Carr, but there is a lot to play with here. Matt Ryan potentially on the move from Atlanta. So I think this is a spot that is so attractive that a quarterback's going to work their way there. And this is a team that's a quarterback away. And a step up from Teddy Bridgewater puts this team, even just a marginal step, moves this team in the playoffs. A big step up moves this team into Super Bowl contention on top of what they already have with the talent, with the projected cap, with their draft capital. This team's in a really good spot. And if this is Dan Quinn, I'm really hoping that he brings in an offensive coordinator. Or, really, this is what I was saying with Vic Fangio. And I get why George Payton decided to move on from Vic Fangio. And if he does bring in Dan Quinn, at least that's his guy, right? He didn't hire Fangio. But if they do hire Dan Quinn, I would implore him, if this team makes a big splash at quarterback, to let the quarterback be a part of, a 3-person hiring committee, basically. Head coach, GM, that quarterback, to make the decision on who that offensive coordinator is. One, you get on goodwill with your quarterback, and I think that's, becoming more and more important. Rodgers, with his frustrations last offseason, Deshaun Watson and his, irritations with the Texans, let them be a part of that decision-making process. And, maybe it's a Joe Brady or maybe it's someone who's been in the league for a long time, just getting another opportunity as the OC with Denver because of their relationship. Or, maybe if it's Rodgers, it's him bringing this QB coach from Green Bay over to Denver. But A lot of options here in play, but I think the Broncos have the best job readily available currently in the NFL. Going to be some other positions that open up, and maybe I'll shake this up and maybe I'll update this down the line. But that's it for my ranking of the current 8 NFL head coaching jobs. 25% of the league looking for a new head coach. It's pretty staggering. But that's going to do it for today's video. Hopefully you all enjoyed. And if you did, hit that like button. It would help me out a ton. If you're new to the channel, want to see more football content, want to help us get to 500 subscribers, just hit that big red subscribe button. And of course, most importantly, comment your rankings of these head coaching positions down in the comment section. Like I said off top, it's very subjective. Love to have your list as I've given you mine. That's going to do it for me. Hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day. Until next time, my name is Tej, and I'm signing off.